All right, welcome everyone. Let's get started. So first of all, welcome to the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign. Today is a special webinar. It's getting comfortable with ICET2 height data and the Open Altimetry online tool. The reason why this is a special webinar is that we have invited members of the NASA Globe Observer citizen scientists, and there are personnel, scientists, researchers, engineers, applications, folks from the NASA ICET2 mission, which we're going to focus on a lot today. So we don't always invite, open it up to everyone, but this is super important because this online tool was designed for researchers to use, to look up at the ICET2 data. But as we go through this, you do know that since this is the trees campaign, we're looking at tree heights, and ICET2 has the ability to measure the height of trees and forest canopies. We want everyone to, who is working with this information, with this data, from the scientists, the researchers, to the citizen scientists, to the students, to the teachers, to be able to understand what this tool actually is and how great and awesome it is to look at some of this tree height, some of the elevation data from ICET2, and then potentially do comparisons with all the globe data coming in. And you'll see in a second that we have a lot of globe data coming in from students and teachers and citizen scientists with tree heights. So let's get started. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction here, and then we're going to get to our feature presentation. This is some information that's really pertinent to what we're going to talk about. So just for those of you who don't know our campaign team, once again, this is the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign, part of the Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment program, which is funded by NASA and supported by NOAA, NSF, and the U.S. Department of State. And our campaign team are Dorian Janney from NASA Goddard in Maryland, Peter Nelson from Oregon State University, Dr. Christopher Schumann from NASA Goddard and UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Peter Falcon from the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And myself, Brian Campbell, I'm at the NASA Wallops Flight Facility in Wallops Island, Virginia. Little quickly about some of the campaign metrics, and as you know, that this campaign officially began when the ICET2 satellite launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base on September 15th of 2018 at 6:02 a.m. Pacific time. But since then, we've been keeping track of the major measurements that are part of the campaign. These measurements are super important because they're not just measurements taken by the students, but they are put into a database for students, teachers, citizen scientists, and also researchers inside and outside of NASA to use as ground-based data, ground truthing data. So since September 15th of 2018, when the campaign began, we have 10,000, this is as of about an hour ago, we have 10,561 tree height measurements from 5,178 sites around the world. We have 8,662 land cover measurements from 6,112 sites, and 8,222 greenings. And those of you who aren't familiar with what that term is, that means green up and green down. So it's looking at the seasonality of trees and leaves, and when the buds come onto the trees, when leaves are starting to form, when they fall off in the winter, okay, and lots of the coniferous trees. But those come from 379 sites, and the majority of those, are from the European Phenology campaign, which is one that we're going to be working with in the near future. And then you can see there's a couple images here showing where the distribution of the tree height measurements, the participating countries in this campaign, as well as the photos of trees. We have had 13 webinars with 774 direct participants. And what that means is that is primarily educators. We do have ones where there are students, coming in from, in their classrooms, but this is primarily the educator participants and also researcher participants coming in from 41 countries. And we have some other things and blogs and documents as well. Our intensive observation period, I'm going to point you down to the bottom right. October 2019 just finished, October 31st, and we had 794 measurements. And everyone who participated, who collected the land cover measurements and at least one other measurement during October received a digital badge on their Globe personal page. And if you didn't, please let me know, because some people, I had a couple of people who had their data stored, and then in November, beginning of November, that was the first time they were able to get their data into the Globe database that they took in October. So they saved it and then sent it in November, but it still counted for October since the dates were still there. Everything was, time tagged. So the winner here is a Majkut out of Globe Poland, who had the most, and he got the participant badge and the winner badge on his page. So we will be having another one coming up in January again. It's going to be tree height observations. So stay tuned for that. Quickly, I'm going to go over this, and Amy is going to talk a little bit more about this, but for those of you who've come on, especially like the citizen scientists and some of the newer campaign members, what we're focusing this campaign on is tree height, okay? And since this campaign was launched when ICET-2 was officially launched into space on September 15th of 2018, we wanted to align the mission, the ICET-2 mission, and the campaign. We wanted to bring them together so then students can then take data collection of tree heights and other observations in their local environments, but then be able to compare this information, be able to compare the ICET-2 data to the Globe data that they see in the database. So since the satellite was launched, we have over 1 trillion measurements. And I believe, and there's some folks here from ICET-2 on here, but, I believe that was 1 trillion measurements before the first year was even here. So, in the chat, let me know if that's accurate. I got that from a couple people, so hopefully that's accurate enough. All right. So since the satellite uses what's called an onboard laser altimeter called ATLAS, the Advanced Topographic Laser Altimeter System, Amy will talk more about that in her presentation, but since it's a laser altimeter, what it does is it sends laser pulses which contain photons from the satellite down to the Earth. They bounce off the surface or whatever, whatever object is there, and then bounce back to the satellite, okay? So since it's able to do that, and forest canopies and trees have elevation, the satellite is able to measure the elevation of trees, the height of trees from space. So let me show you a quick video here. This is called ICET-2 Elevates Our Planet. It's a really cool video, but I just want to show you, even though we're talking trees today, since it's a trees campaign, ICET-2 does a lot of stuff. So I just want to give you the feel for everything that it can do. So please take a look at this. It's about 1.5 minutes long or so. And here we go.
From satellite data, we have a very good handle of how our Earth looks like. We can see oceans, we can see the sea ice, we can see our forest. What is much, much harder to measure is how high things are on a global scale. Almost impossible.
ICET-2 adds the third dimension, the elevation. Repeating measurements from ICET-2 will allow us to measure changes in the ice sheets or in the ocean or in land.
ICET-2 is designed to measure the changes that are going on in the cryosphere, in the polar regions.
All the change is at the edges. Those are the steeply sloping parts of the glacier that interact with the ocean, and that's where all the action is. That's where all the mass is being lost.
In order to estimate the mass changes, we need to know the height of things. The mission ICET-2 carries a single instrument. It's called ATLAS, the Advanced Topographic Laser Altimeter System.
ATLAS sends out small pulses of laser light 10,000 times a second. And by measuring precisely how long it takes that light to go from the spacecraft down to the Earth and back up to the spacecraft, allows us to figure out what the height of the surface is beneath ICET-2.
We need to measure the time of flight of a single photon or a single laser pulse with a precision of 1 billionth of a second.
NASA engineers had to come up with entirely new ways of measuring time very precisely.
A billionth of a second translate to an elevation change precision of just a few centimeters. Climate change is amplified in the polar regions. ISAT-2 is designed to measure those areas and will help us to understand what's going on with our planet.
All right, so hopefully that video gave you a little background into ISAT-2. Since it's a laser altimeter in space, we're able to measure everything from the elevation of the ice to bodies of water to the oceans to landforms to trees to lots of things that are around. So the ISAT-2 is an all-encompassing mission. It's one of those that is really helping us to look at how our planet is changing over time. I like to show this image. This is one of the first one I've seen since. This is one of the first ones I saw since when ISAT-2 was early after the data started coming in for ISAT-2, and this is showing in Mexico here. Yeah. So you can see here if you look here at the graphic, you can see this straight line, this straight blue line. That's just showing the the ISAT-2 orbit path. And then what you see here on the graph below, you can see everything that starts off here from a forested hillside, which is very cool because you can see the elevation here, which is representing the trees on this forested hillside, that runs down into shallow water bathymetry and eventually into the ocean waves. You can actually see the waveforms. In that shallow water bathymetry, you can really see that a lot of those photons, from the satellite penetrated down into the water and down to the surface. So that's always a cool one just to show. All right. So as a reminder, what we have here is, there's a bunch of citizen scientists in here during this webinar, and we have the trees tool that has been part of the NASA Globe Observer Citizen Science app since March 26, 2019. And this trees tool allows you to very simply measure the height of trees by using just your mobile device. And what it does is it uses your mobile device's internal gyroscope and magnetometer to calculate the angles that you're holding the phone at your eye level to the base of the tree and the top of the tree and basically and some pacing that you're going to do from where you're standing to the tree. Combine all those things together, and the phone and your mobile device phone will tell you what the height of the tree is. And they've been pretty accurate so far. We had a couple bugs here and there, but that's something that happens with technology. So we've got a lot of bugs happening, off and on. So we haven't had any lately, but at the onset when things are new, things like that happen. So we have lots of great response here. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of tree observations coming in all the time. So, keep them coming. And, it just helps to build a much more robust data set that students and teachers and researchers can use and citizen scientists can use, in discussion, for research projects. So, the goal of the campaign, of course, is student research. So we really want the students to be able to, take the data that they get from other students, from citizen scientists, and the ISAT-2 satellite data to aid in research projects. So if any teachers that are on here want to talk about that, something that's coming up next month is going to be super cool as part of the campaign. It's going to be 2 special webinars, and stay tuned for that in a couple slides here. But I want to show you the real quick promo, and then we're going to fly through the next couple slides so we can get to the featured presentation. But this is showing you the trees tool promo. right? And as you saw in there, to learn more about it, you can go to observer.globe.gov and learn more about that. There's also the cloud. You can observe clouds, mosquito habitat mapping, and then also land cover. All right. So I wanted to point out this new feature that happened in the last update. So if you haven't updated your app recently, please check it and do the update, because if you're a teacher and you work with students and you don't have many devices to use that you want to do that, or if you're a citizen scientist and when you have multiple people measure tree heights, you do have an option now when you go into the tree's help, you can change current user height settings. So like me, I'm 6 foot 6 inches tall. You know, my son is about 5'2" right now. He's only 12, so he's 5'2". But if he takes a cloud observation with my height in there, it's going to really give you a wrong tree height measurement, because it's measuring the angles that you're using to look at the tree, the base of the tree and the top of the tree from your eye level. So it's a new option on there. So what you can do is, you know, with each student, you can just quickly go in there, and then if they know their height, they can pop their height in there and take an observation, hand to the next student, do the same thing, or citizen scientist or whatever. So very cool and easy to do. All right. So I mentioned this a second ago, and we will get started with the next feature presentation. But next month, we are going, instead of a regular webinar, we are going to have two. Now, let me explain this. It's going to be called what's called an open forum, bringing together Globe students to informally chat about trees campaign student research projects. So we will have two, and what that means is we want you, if you're a teacher, to bring as many students as you want into the webinar to informally talk to other Globe students from around the world who are part of this campaign and discuss, you know, anything you want about trees. Discuss with us, discuss with discuss with researchers, you know, discuss with campaign team members and other students and teachers around the world what you want to do. So there's two choices. You can go to both webinars. You can go to one webinar. That's fine. But the first one will be Tuesday, December 3rd at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, which is 2 p.m. UTC. And then we will have another one Wednesday, December 4th, so the next day at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 1 a.m. UTC. And we're holding two because we want as many students to be able to talk to each other as they can. And I know, as you know, the time zones get a little tricky with this campaign and all the Globe campaigns, because we have virtually every time zone covered as part of the campaigns. So that's why we're having two. So once again, this is to bring together students. There's going to be no formal presentation, no featured presentation. It's going to be an open forum where students can come together to discuss the Trees campaign and student research projects and what they can do, in order to, take observations and look at the data. Everything's going to be live. It's going to be, informal. So think about that. And for more information, you can see on the bottom here, that's the address. If you go to our campaign website where the webinars are, you'll be able to see more information about that. And I'll be sending out an email about that to all of you, soon after, probably in the next few days. All right, so campaign website. Okay, I'm not going to go to that, but today's feature presentation is called Getting Comfortable with ICET2 Height Data and the Open Altimetry Online Tool. And with us today is Amy FitzGerrell from the user services team of the National Snow and Ice Data Center, which is also, called NSIDC, that's the acronym, in Boulder, Colorado. And let me tell you why NSIDC, okay? And as you can see here, as you know, ICET2 collects its elevation data from across the planet. Well, this data comes from the satellite. It's downlinked to Earth, as you can see here. It's reformatted, checked for quality, repackaged into scientific data sets, delivered to NSIDC, who then distributes it and archives this ICET2 data, because there is a lot of data coming from this satellite. So, NSIDC is great. They worked with us with ICET1, and there's a lot of other missions and, campaigns that they work with. So, Amy will make you comfortable in looking at this Open Altimetry online tool by talking about, how do you look at the ISAT2 height data? How do you look at the globe data and then do some comparison to find some, coincidental overpasses, things like that. So, Amy, I will pass it over to you, and thank you in advance for this. Oh, I should mention that also at the end, we will have a time for some question and answers. So thank you, Amy, and it's all yours.
Thanks, Brian. I will share my screen here.
Let me unshare mine here.
Okay.
Yep, there you go. All good.
Alrighty. As Brian mentioned, I work with the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Boulder, Colorado, where it's currently about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, a little over 4 degrees Celsius, and sunny. I'm going to sort of buzz through my introduction to Open Altimetry and getting around using the data that's archived in this tool. Really quickly, Open Altimetry is the product of a collaboration between the National Snow and Ice Data Center, the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and the San Diego Supercomputer Center at UC San Diego. It was a custom-built application to meet discovery, access, and visualization needs of data from NASA's ISAT and ISAT-2 missions. Today, I'll be focusing on the ISAT-2 data and how it relates to data collected for the Trees Around the Globe campaign. Specifically, we'll be honing in more on the ISAT Atlas Level 3A land and vegetation height dataset, which is also known as ATL-08. So briefly, I'll switch into about the ISAT-2 mission, as Brian touched on as well. The primary instrument is called the Advanced Topographic Laser Altimeter System, also known as ATLAS, which is a photon counting laser. It's one laser, but it's split into 6 beams. I'll zoom in a little bit here to show you that beam pattern. So it's got 3 weak and strong pairs. You can get a quick glimpse of which are weak and strong by using the Select Beams button here. I'll go over the tools more thoroughly, but just a quick intro to talk to the instrument. Atlas takes measurements every 70 centimeters along the satellite's ground path, and it has a footprint of about 13 meters diameter. The beam pairs are spaced 3.3 kilometers apart, with a distance of 90 meters between each weak and strong beam. So you zoom in a little closer here, you can see the spacing. ISAT-2 repeats its ground tracks every 91 days to allow scientists to track height changes in all 4 seasons. The land and vegetation height dataset, ATL-08, contains along track heights above the WGS-84 ellipsoid for ground and contains ground and canopy surface information. The ground and canopy surfaces are processed in fixed 100-meter data segments. So what you'll see in Open Altimetry are the approximate midpoints of the 100-meter data segment, where the terrain and canopy statistics for that segment are reported. So currently, that's what you're looking at here if we, as we zoom around on my screen and are looking at these data points. I'll put a slide up at the end of this webinar with links to the NASA spec sheet for the ISAT-2 instrument and to NSIDC's gateway for ISAT-2 data access and the documentation, so that anyone interested in diving more deeply into ISAT-2, ATL-08, or the other ISAT-2 datasets archived at NSIDC, you can grab those links and do that. So now I'll introduce the Open Altimetry web application as a whole. To get going on that, we'll first introduce the reset button. So this resets you back out to sort of your home view. As you can see, there's a calendar option to choose different days of data. we've got a cloud layer button, which is actually the MODIS True Color Terra Corrected Reflectance layer. This can be helpful in areas to determine why you might see a ground track, but sometimes the data fall out and aren't available. And one of the primary reasons for seeing a lack of data where you see a ground track is due to cloud cover. The laser doesn't penetrate clouds well. You can also zoom to a bounding box or a point. I'll do a quick demonstration here of zooming to a point. So you punch in your longitude and latitude, click on the update map, and what that's done is actually centered the map to that point. So it doesn't add a graphic. If you want to zoom in, actually, I'm not sure it's centered. Actually, it probably did. I've got the clouds layer on blocking my view. So knowing that it doesn't zoom into that point or add a graphic, but you can then you can manually use the zoom button to get in and know that that coordinate, there's a coordinate readout here in the lower left, is about where your cursor is hovering. You can also turn on the reference ground track layer. These, when they're this pink color, are the inactive but present tracks that have data. If I click on one of those tracks, it'll show the dates where data are available. And if I click on that down here in the lower left again, it also updates the map to show what the currently selected date with data are being displayed in the map. I'll turn that off. Over here in the upper right-hand part of the map, you can see that we have a number of different layer options to turn on. Again, I'll focus on ATL08 today, but there's also ATL06, which is our land ice height data set. We have ATL07 and 10, which are sea ice height and sea ice freeboard data sets, and ATL12, which is our ocean elevation data set. The last tools I'll introduce here are, let's see, we have the ability to change the current map view's projection. So we have the Arctic polar projection, regular geographic, and Antarctic polar projection. There's also an information button, which this goes into detail about the some of the layer details, what comprises the background layers, the data products, a beam legend. And lastly, I'll show the annotation option. If I turn these on, you can see across the map where people have added annotations for points of interest or potentially problems they found in the data. So this is a good reporting tool. If you think you're seeing a data anomaly, you can add an annotation, search it for a small area, and it allows you to change whether you're looking at a data anomaly or if it's an annotation for yourself, a surface feature of interest. So you can sort of dial in annotations and they'll persist in the map as either public or private, depending on the box you check, to help you get back to where you were. So what I'm going to do here is I've added an annotation that I'm going to search for. I called it globe. So this is where I found an area where we've got ATL08 data that overlie or that coincide fairly closely with a citizen science contributed point from the GLOBE advanced data access tool that I found in Sweden. So if I click on my annotation, you can see the details that I added for this. So I'll close that for now. I'm going to open up Google Earth really quickly and just show you. This is where I use Google Earth to plot the coordinates of the citizen science contributed point. So this is, I've just added a screen grab of the line item for this site here. So that's what it looks like plotted in Google Earth. So close that. I'll keep this up for a bit. So that data point lies roughly over here. So it's relatively close to the ATL08 data. If I expand, or if I click on one of these points, I can get the snapshot of the latitude, longitude, and the elevation at this point. What you may notice is there's a couple of things going on. As I mentioned earlier, the ATL08 data are being reported as aggregated data over a 100-meter segment. So this point isn't necessarily really the exact height of a tree in this area, but it is, if we were in an area with sort of a continuous forest, it would be the continuous height approximately over that 100-meter segment. And so I'm having to make some assumptions that in this neighborhood, the tree heights are possibly similar across this subdivision if they were planted at the same time, and should reasonably reflect what this citizen science collected at the point that's over here. But it isn't an exact art, and it's the best we have for the time being. The ATL03, which is the geolocated photon data, is the underlying data, and I can show you that in a little bit. That is unclassified, whereas the ATL08 has been classified into canopy height and terrain elevation. And so the background noise and errant photons have been cleaned out to report just the data and other important parameters that you would potentially be interested in. So another thing that you might notice is that this elevation for the satellite data of ATL08 is reported at 73.9 meters, whereas the citizen scientists have reported that the elevation at this site was 37.6 meters. And this is because Atlas is reported in as a measurement reference to the WGS 84 ellipsoid height, whereas the terrain height being reported from the Globes app appears to be what's called orthometric height, which is sort of your land height in the area where you are relative to sea level. So I've got a quick graphic that I'll show. It's a brief explanation of why we're seeing a difference in elevation, but there's also, I've got a geoid height calculator that you can use to run through the routine of showing whether you're on track or not. What I've done is used, let me show you that really quickly. It's the UNAVCO GeoHeight calculator. This is one of the links I'll include at the end of my presentation. It lets you punch in the latitude and the longitude and the GPS elevation. So these are going to be the coordinates from the ATL08 data. When I submit this, it spits out what my the GPS ellipsoidal height is. We knew that was the elevation I input, and it calculates the geoid height at 36.7 meters. Orthometric height is calculated by subtracting the geoid height from the GPS ellipsoid height. So this 37.25 meters is the approximate orthometric height in this area. which again goes back to my diagram here of how it actually matches reasonably well with what the citizen scientist had measured. The canopy heights in ATL08 are reported as a difference between the canopy photon height and the estimated terrain surface. So you don't have to worry about any conversion in the tree height reported here. Over this 100-meter segment, the tree height was calculated to be about 4.5 meters, which it coincides roughly with the tree height calculated, but it won't be exact because this person calculated the exact height of a very specific tree that isn't directly in line with the ATL08 orbit track. Well, the ISAT-2 orbit track collecting ATL08 data. So another functionality that you have within Open Altimetry is, I'm going to scooch this over a little bit. If I use the Select a Region tool, and this allows me to view the elevation profile over this area. And so this is what you also saw. I kind of cheated and gave you a preview in my geoid height calculation summary. But you can see how on the map over here, the blue dot is highlighted as I move my cursor along the graph of the weak and the strong beams over here. So this is just the surface elevation area being reported, and then the canopy heights are reported in the graph below here for all these points. And not every point qualifies to necessarily return a canopy height. There are restrictions in terms of the number of photons that need to be received and but in the processing of the data before a canopy height can be generated. So you will sometimes see a little data gap. And this is where, if I switch to the ATL03 photon heights, you can see the data returned here. But again, these are high confidence, but we still don't have a classification to know whether these are necessarily backscatter or noise. We can't tell whether this is a canopy versus the terrain. And that's what ATL03 has done the extensive processing to classify and give us a relative confidence of what we're looking at for any given beam. So lastly, I'll touch on how to get the data. If you click this download data as a CSV, that will do a quick download of all the data, again, located just within the select a region. So it's subsetted to be the data contained within this area. And if you choose, excuse me, the second option is to download the data subsetted in HDF5 format. And that will be delivered from NSIDC to you to use as you choose. Lastly, there are some options within these little hamburger icon to fiddle with your chart view. You can download a PNG image or other images of this exact chart in different formats. So that's about it for my presentation. Like I say, that was kind of a quick and dirty overview of getting around in Open Altimetry. Here's my I'll pop this up quickly. This is, if you have any questions, either about using Open Altimetry that you'd like more help with, please feel free to email NSIDC at nsidc.org. We have more than just me on the user services staff, but I'm the one who primarily answers either Open Altimetry or ISAT-2 data questions. And we're more than happy to answer any questions you have. This is the link to some of the technical specs for the ISAT-2 instrument. That's where you can see like the footprint diameter, the beam pattern, description, that sort of thing. And then this link this brings you to the overview page for all of the ISAT-2 data that we archive at NSIDC, but also lets you go in by individual data sets to choose ATLOA to look at the the user guide or the technical references so you can get a better feel for the processing that's been applied to the data to generate the final output product. And lastly, this is the link to the UNAVCO site. If anyone's interested in the geo height calculator, it is handy if you're looking at orthometric heights versus ellipsoid heights. It does help demystify why there can seem like a sizable difference, but it's just taken into account the undulation of the geoid across the planet in different regions. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. So with the presentation, what I suggest is that those of you who want to, you know, really, you know, take a look with your students, or if you're a researcher or if you're a citizen scientist, really go into the, you know, to the online tool, to the Open Altimetry online tool, and play around with it, you know, and then also go back and rewatch Amy's presentation once it's archived, and it'll be archived by tomorrow sometime. Once it's done recording, it takes a little while for Zoom to let me know that it's actually there and ready to be archived, grabbed and archived. So, you know, take a look at the presentation again, you know, get a feel for what Open Altimetry does, you know, and as Amy mentioned, you know, you're not always going to get the, you know, maybe you measured only one tree. Okay, and I'm going to reinforce this. You measure one tree. ISAT2 may not hit that exact tree, okay? There's a good chance it won't, but there's a chance it will, okay? But here's where we go to something called, and I say it probably during most webinars, something called data density, okay? And you know, one thing that's great about data density is it provides an easier way to do comparisons between the GLOBE data and the ISAT2 data. And so that data density, what that means is if you're in an area where there's lots of trees, if you're in an area that has lots of trees in a small location, get as many of those tree height observations as you can. So then there'd be a better chance that ISAT2 is going to hit that location. So, you know, data density, more data for the students to use, for the citizen scientists, more data for researchers, and then more data to potentially be able to compare using this Open Altimetry tool. So, yeah, so, you know, the whole data density thing is super important. And, you know, we stress this, you know, often during these webinars, that we really want to have those multiple measurements at the same location. You know, like if you're in a grove of trees, if you happen to be walking through the woods or, you know, the forest, and you're able to observe the base and the top of the tree clearly and be able to walk to it, get measurements of each one of those tree heights. So, and then if you have, say you have, you know, in a, you know, a 100 meter square space, you have the height measurements of 20 or 30 trees. That's amazing. That's good data density there. So I will open it up to questions now. The first question, and this is for you, Amy, and there's a couple things in the chat about it, but what geoid is used in the calculation?
So this is it's ITRF 20, I want to say 2014 reference frame, and the WGS 84 ellipsoid. But in case that's not touching on the exact answer that the user is hoping for, I'm happy to get back with the user if that's possible. Let me. I don't think right off the top of my tongue I've got that handy.
Okay.
I was going to point out one thing really quickly. If you're trying to predict where ISAT2 might overpass your area, if you're curious, that's what turning on the reference ground track layer can be really handy. So if you're going to take a group of people out on a field trip, you could actually target being within the range of one of these reference ground tracks, potentially, if it coincides with your local region. And you could, you know, potentially build a field trip around that and get a number of tree heights in an area close to where you live, and wait to see if data are either already exist or will roll in over the years the ISAT2 is up and running. So that's my quick digression there.
So yeah, so you're able to, and I don't know if you can do this like live while we're popping up here, but you know, if you go to the area, there's a latitude longitude finder. So as the participants know, you know, from Globe, that each one of the trees that they take a measurement of, it is geolocated. They get a latitude and longitude from the trees. So from the tree that they're measuring. So in Open Altimetry, there is a latitude longitude box, and potentially you could put in, correct, Amy, you could put in the latitude and longitude of that tree, you know, for instance, all right, and then, you know, you'll be able to see, you know, where, you know, I guess the counter will pop up then, and then you can see, you know, if ISAT2, you know, if a track went over that specific location, like when, and, you know.
Yeah, and that's actually exactly what I did. I downloaded the data from the ADAT tool and just started punching in latitude, longitudes till I found one that was reasonably close to an ISAT2 overpass already to use in this demo. Easier said than done, as it turns out, but I found one.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Brian. It's Valerie. May I add something? We're working on an app for smartphones to be able to plug in your latitude, longitude, or your zip code or your location in order to see where and when an ISAT2 track may be passing nearby your location. And that hopefully will be out by beginning of next year. And we'll let Brian know about it so he can pass it along to all of you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Valerie.
And while we're here, I have a quick response to the first question that was launched. In that for the geoid height, it's that information I found in the ATL03 user guide. It would be in the ATL03 algorithm theory by ATBD, which I'm forgetting the acronym for now. It's data brain, algorithm theoretical basis documentation. But for the basis of the inputs to all of these higher level products, it would be the EGM 2008 geoid. But it would depend on whether that may or may not be applied. So I know some of the data sets like ATL 13, which is a sort of an early release for us, has an orthometric height listed in as one of the parameters, as well as the ellipsoid height. But all of, I think the bulk of the other data sets like ATL08 are only reporting in that ellipsoid height. So you'd have to calculate the geoid height using the EGM 2008 geoid.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? If you want to ask a question directly to Amy, if you haven't put it in the chat, I don't see any more in the chat. Please unmute yourself, and I'll give you a second to do that. And if you'd like to answer a question, ask a question about it, or to any of us, or I should also mention we have a couple folks. Actually, I think Dorian is on. If she has anything to add to this, as you know, Dorian Janney at Goddard is part of the campaign team. And if there's anybody else who wants to ask any questions or discuss anything else, you just unmute yourself and we'll go from there.
I just say hello to everybody. Nice to see so many folks on. I've had a little bit of technical difficulties for some reason on my part. My sound has been a little strange, so that's why I've been mostly quiet, but absolutely fascinating. And I think this is just a great way for kids to be able to get in there, utilize the technology, and be able to compare and contrast what they're finding to what the satellite's finding. That's always fascinating.
All right, anybody else? Thank you, Dorian. All right. So remember, and I'm going to pop this up on the screen again, that next month, instead of the regular webinars, we will have, I'll pop this up here, we will have the informal open forums for students to come together. And please, spread this to your fellow teachers. And, we love to have, we've never done this before, so we don't know how well it's going to work. So, but you always got to try something at least once, and to see how it works. And then, either it works or you learn from it, do whatever you need to do. So we wanted to have an open forum to get students to come together comfortably and informally to chat about the campaign and research projects. And once again, Tuesday, December 3rd at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. UTC, and Wednesday, December 4th, 2019 at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 o'clock a.m. UTC. And you can attend one, or if you're super into it, you can, come to both of them. That would be great. We'd love to have you. And please note that both of these also will be recorded, but if you're there in person, you can interact, directly with whoever is there. So once again, there won't be a formal presentation. It'll be all open forum. If 2 classrooms show up, cool. If 20 classrooms show up, cool. The more the merrier, but we're not going to, close it down because there's not enough people in here, because we want anybody to be able to talk to each other, about the campaign. So bring your students, talk to your other teacher friends, your educator colleagues, and come join in. All right. So anything else? Let me go back to the chat here. All right.
There was one question about whether the data are free, and I should point out that yes, they are totally free and available to anyone who would like to visit our website or the Open Altimetry application and download data. You will need to sign up for, it's called a URS, User Registration System, I believe, username and password, but there is no cost to do that, and you just put your profile together, and that's your ticket to data.
Another question is right now, and I think you might have touched on this. Another question, Amy, is how do we know when it passed through a specific area? And
so that's
so
that's where the reference ground track layer in Open Altimetry can be really handy. And when you first turn it on, it looks like it's unlabeled. If you hover over one of the ground tracks that's in the vicinity that you're interested in, and you click on it, it will then display the dates with data available. And also these ground tracks are repeated. So it's possible data aren't available yet, but over the next months or years, they should. And again, sometimes data aren't available, even though clearly there's a reference ground track there with a date that is in the past. But if it was a cloudy day during that overflight, it's a good chance that that's the reason why there are no data visible, despite it seeming like there should be.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns was, that, they'd have to look day by day, click each calendar day in order to do it. But with that reference track, it then pops up, as you mentioned, where it's available,
Yeah, and it is sort of a day by day looking thing. There's not a snapshot just yet where you can see everything all at once. This is a huge data set. So is that in the logistics are?
Is that in the queue for future things?
It has been asked before, and I did put a ticket into the developer queue to look into it, but okay. There's a lot of other stuff that's currently going on to just add functionality and enhancements. And I think that really would depend on compute power to handle that sort of data load, to show everything that a user wants to see within a region of interest all at the same time. If they drew something, if their region of interest was covered, say like the entire country of Greenland, that would take forever to display. So I think it's in the works if possible, but I shouldn't make any promises as to how feasible that's going to be. Okay. Especially since I also don't work as an Open Altimetry developer. So it's easy for me to say. Yeah,
sure. All right, anybody else? All right, we will bring this to a close, and I'm going to hit stop recording right now.